This particular picture is at Subumuk Dam, and the white building in the background is where the crew stays. They have the cook room in the bottom and along with an office, and then in the upper story is sleeping quarters. This particular job, that's a boat, is an air-cooled boat, which has a propeller cage so they can plow around through the wood. This particular job, they are pulling out boom logs which have been transported down from a previous job that's not being used, and they will restring this boom, bore the logs if necessary, and we usually have it available for this particular drive. This is the rear coming down by Pittston Farm, where the North and South Branch come together and start to form the head of Subumuk Lake. You can see boom, it's used for sweeping and cleaning. You put one small boat in near the shore and then pull wood out, and it's captured by this boom and brought down. In the foreground is the cradle of one of the boats, which was probably brought in by truck, put in the water, and will be moved as needed down the river. This is a picture of a crew sweeping the shores. And you'll notice there are some wood that escapes. These were called deadheads, and probably are still laying around some of the jobs even after the drive was completed in 1978. This is the boats of a driving crew. This particular one is on Subumuk Floyd, near the head of the Floyd. The crews have gone back to camp for the night, and things will rest quietly until they resume activity in the morning. This is a typical bunch of pulpwood on the lake, and the bow of a 35-foot boat with a 100-horse diesel motor. And here again, the propeller was caged, and they can plow around through this wood and use it without any damage. Occasionally a piece of wood, something would get in through the cage, and they would have to get it out the best way they could. This is at the head of Subumuk. There's the boat still in there, and surrounded by a bunch of pulpwood and dry kai, as it's called, which is driftwood. Much of this went down through, and then we had to either sluice it down through Subumuk Dam or pulled it out what we could, and then it was, if we pulled out a bunch of wood we would try to burn this and help clean it up. This was always a problem. Here's a raft of wood tied in for the night, and I guess we can't see it. This is a campfire. Actually, these set of camps were located a couple of miles south of Baker Lake, but they were accessed by coming up the North Branch. This location had many buildings, and many of the smaller ones up to 20, 30 feet long were moved, but the main cook room had sat there for many years and was impregnated with grease and oil and everything else, and it was not practical to move. This was the best way to clean up this situation. This is starting of building a cutting right away and cleaning up brush on the Golden Road, which would eventually replace the river drives. This site was known during construction as Hannibal's Crossing. It's where the Golden Road would cross the West Branch. This is a few miles below the outlet in from Lobster Lake, and we had to cut right away from both directions, so which meant at times traveling crews were a long distance to do this job. On the right-hand end was not far from the lobster camps. An interesting incident that you could not see on this picture was after the road was surveyed out and it was marked by a string laid out by the foresters or surveyors laying out the road. A short distance from the river, a plane crashed and even hit that string and broke it. And it was near enough to the river so that they were able to come down by boat and go in and salvage the motor and what parts were available. The cutting crews they would come in at night from doing that job. They would bring in little pieces of that plane. This is a job that was an earlier start of mechanical harvesting. This particular job is up above Jackman, and this wood was actually loaded and trucked through to Millnocket, which was over 100 miles distance, but it was our start of getting off the river drives. This is another mechanical harvesting job. This is a fellow buncher which would move up to a tree, cut it off, and place it so it could be picked up by skidders. This is another picture of a fellow buncher harvesting a tree and placing it for removal. This is being loaded. This particular device is a fellow forwarder, it's called, and those devices you can see on the back end are big grapples that after the load is put on, they can squeeze those grapples shut and haul this wood to a roadside landing. At the roadside landings, the wood was and then this machine is a Logma Dilemma, and they got on the back side of the pile and would pull the log through, leave the brush, and with this method the brush was left on the back side of the pile, top the tree off, and then place it over for loading onto trucks. This is a trailer, actually two connected together, which was tried, and these trucks are all off-highway loads, about 12 feet wide, and quite a scary thing to meet if you see it for the first time on the road. But it was the start of our tree-length system, which was much easier to handle than with the. This is the landing where the large pile of wood was, and except in the background you can see what had been a big gravel esker, and that gravel went into the construction of the Golden Road. The water coming in by the canoe, red canoe on the right, is coming in from Dole Brook, and back when the drive was going, one of our main objectives was to get the wood down the river beyond this point. Then we could use the water from Dole Brook and Long Pond and some of the other ponds to carry the rest of the area down the river. This was what someone envisioned as what it would look like in the future. This is cutter, chopper, limber, whatever, and then put the wood into the mill. And I don't think this has ever come to fruition.